Thanks so much for joining. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining another iOS GCCO webinar. I'm Amy Byrne. I'm based at the Bokrijk Arboretum in the States, and I'm the GCCO coordinator and also on the iOS board as well. So as some of you may be familiar, if this is, if you've attended webinars before, if this is your first webinar, welcome. We have two wonderful presentations today from Sven and Maribel. And as always, following each presentation, we'll have time for questions. So while our presenters are talking, you can put questions in the chat, or once they're finished presenting, you can unmute or use the raise your hand icon in Zoom, and we can call on each of you and go through your questions or comments. And after both presentations, we'll still have more time for questions and discussion as well. And to kick things off, I'll actually pass it off to Roderick, the iOS president, who will share more announcements and then hand it off to our first presenter. So Roderick.
Thank you, Amy. Hope everyone can hear me. Welcome all to the webinar. Great to see you all here. Couple of announcements. First, the conference is coming up. If I got the count right, we're actually 102 days away. So exciting. Please register if you want to attend. Bear in mind that the early bird registration ends July 5. So that's coming up. You're definitely welcome to register as a late bird, but you just have to pay a bit more. So I recommend you register in time. The tours are very popular, and the actual pre-tour is full at the moment, but you can sign up for a waiting list in case more spaces become available. And the post-tour is still open if you want to register for that. Highly recommend those tours, always very popular. And especially in this case, we will be touring in Mexico. Great to see this webinar well attended. These continue to be like probably the largest meetings of members of the iOS outside of our conferences, though there is some competition now from the Oak Open Days, because we just had a great season of 4 Oak Open Day events in Australia, New Zealand, Belgium, and the UK. That was in May and June. Also well attended, a total of 70 plus people registered. And if you count the hosts and guides, we actually had over 100 people involved. So that was very exciting and a very successful season. So if you have any questions about our events or anything else to do with the iOS, we'll have a moment at the end to address any of those questions. So keep them in mind or put them in the chat, and we'll discuss that at the end if anyone has any questions about the iOS. I'm really looking forward to this webinar. We got Maribel Arenas Navarro from Mexico and Sven Bronckaers from Belgium. I happen to have met them both recently, actually, Maribel in Madrid, where she presented a poster. I think it was regarding this work, actually, we're going to hear about, which was in part funded by an iOS Oak Conservation and Research Fund. So very much looking forward to hearing from Maribel now. And later we'll hear from Sven, who I also met recently in Belgium during the Oak Open Day events, and a fascinating visit to Bokrijk Arboretum, which deserves to be much better known than it is at the moment. It has a fantastic oak collection, which I look forward to hearing about now. So I think that's all from me for now. I'd like to turn it over to Maribel. Thank you. Great, we see your screen now. Can you see
the screen?
Yep.
Okay. Let me... Well, Good morning. My name is Maribel Arenas, and I'm going to present the results of the protection and conservation actions through the extinction risk assessment method for 5 endemic Mexican oak species. Well, oaks are woody plants that occupy diverse ecosystems, and it has been recognized that oaks play an important ecological role as key species. This means they are species that provide habitat for many organisms and contribute to forming the soil, have several types of interactions with different animals, plants, and ectomycorrhizal fungi, and also provide food to animals. But also, oaks possess a high cultural and economic value. Well, Mexico has a high environmental heterogeneity because of its complex geological and climatic history, with several mountain systems that converge through the country. Oaks underwent an extraordinary diversification in Mexico along the different mountain chains, and we can find 161 to 168 oak species, which represent the 17% worldwide, of which 17% are endemic. This diversification resulted in several endemism centers, such as the Sierra Madre del Sur geographic province, which is located between western Jalisco and the isthmus of Tehuantepec in Oaxaca. The Sierra Madre del Sur is considered Mexico's most diverse and complex geographic province, with more than 7,000 vascular plants. Especially the north portion of the Sierra Madre del Sur has been pointed out by Randowski, who identified as a floristic province called Serranías Meridionales, and later Torres Miranda identified the Serranías Meridionales de Jalisco as a biodiversity hotspot with a high number of species, including several endemic species of Quercus, among others. So I started my PhD in this region in 2017 with the project Morpho-Functional Assembly of Oaks in a Diversification Center in Mexico, and I began to study 21 oak species, analyzing the leaves, the wood, and several ecological data. But one day, in 2 years later, we discovered that illegal logging appeared in the plots that I was studying. Most of the illegal logging that occurred in the area was carried out with to cut the pines, but the method that they used to bring them down is by skidding, and then they destroy all the adjacent vegetation. So the high biodiversity of species in this region makes essential to evaluate their habitat status and current and future threats. But how can we protect these species? The IUCN, the International Union for Conservation Nature, employs a multifaceted approach to species protection, encompassing scientific assessment, policy advocacy, and on-the-ground conservation efforts. Their work includes maintaining the IUCN Red List of threatened species, which identifies and categorizes species at risk. The Red List of Oaks species was published recently and categorizing the oaks according to the existing information into different risk categories. Unfortunately, many Mexican oak species are included. While the IUCN Red List informs about conservation efforts, it often serves as a reference to the Mexican law. In Mexico, the domestic legal framework for protecting the threatened species is established by the Mexican Official Standard NOM, or NOM 059. The NOM uses the Mexican Wild Species Extinction Risk, or the MER or ERAM, to identify species at risk in Mexico and establish some categories. The Mexican wild species extinction risk is carried out by evaluating 4 main criteria that give a score to each species, which are the amplitude of the taxon distribution, habitat status, intrinsic biological vulnerability, and the impact of the human activity on the taxon. Here, for example, we have a table with a lot of questions. So each criterion consists of different questions and measurements that must be asked depending of is a plant or animal evaluated. For example, for plants, there are questions about the type of vegetation, if requires a specific pollination or mycorrhiza, or information about the germination rate. So each question assigns a score, and once the score is added up to the species, falls into a category. The score will serve to include, eliminate, or change the risk category of each species. So regarding to the Mexican oaks, 168 species have been included in the IUCN Red List, where more than half of the species are not assigned to a risk category, and 27 species lack sufficient information to be evaluated. And regarding to the NOM, the Mexican law, in the most of the recent version of these years, and an update project to the NOM 2025, only 2 oak species are included, which are Quercus mcdougallii as threatened and Quercus tomentella as endangered. So most Mexican oak species are not protected under the Mexican law. In the Serranías Meridionales region, 2 microendemic species are found, Quercus cualensis and Quercus tuitensis. Moreover, 3 endemic species to the southwestern Mexico are also located, Quercus nixoniana, centenaria, and mexiae. And the recent IUCN evaluation placed Quercus cualensis and nixoniana as endangered, centenaria and mexiae as data deficient, and tuitensis as vulnerable. So the objective of this project was provide the necessary information, including distribution maps, current and climate change projections, the current state of the populations, and other relevant data to facilitate the inclusion of endemic and microendemic oak species into the NOM and to assign a IUCN category. Also, we developed educational strategies to assess the significance to the species to the community. We divided the methodology in 4 stages: fieldwork, distribution models, extinction risk method, and educational activities. In the fieldwork, we established plots in different locations where the species was found. We measured the height and the DBH to make categories. We recorded the phenological state, especially the presence or absence to acorns. We recorded the presence of accompanying plants or animals, and the anthropogenic disturbance were nervy such as proximity to roads, recent fires, and garbage drums. In the distribution modeling, we first created a database of all species records from previously fieldwork, JBI of data, Naturalista records, Envarium records, and relevant articles. We delineated a model area using polygons derived from land use and vegetation layers for Mexico, and we selected the most important variables for each species to model the current layers and the future scenarios. And last, the extinction risk evaluates the 4 criteria previously mentioned as amplitude of the taxon distribution, habitat status, intrinsic biological vulnerability, and impact of the human activity on the taxon. For the future distribution models, we used the WorldClim 2.1 bioclimatic variables, the bioclimatic variables layers for the pessimistic and optimistic scenario for 2 different periods with the general circulation model MIROC 6. As a result, we obtained a database for every species with confirmed presence and absence. We obtained the geographical occurrence information for each species from specimen databases, herbarium, and fieldwork to obtain the most significant representation and confirmed presence and absence locations for each species. To select the bioclimatic variables, the variance influence factor test was performed on the 15 bioclimatic variables for each species to avoid collinearity between the variables and errors in the predictions due to the model's overfitting. Here's some pictures doing fieldwork, and well, first, I will present the results of Quercus cualensis. Quercus cualensis is a local endemic oak of Jalisco described in 2003 by Luz Maria González, and it is restricted to the upland region between the village of El Cuale and the Zimapan mines in Jalisco, Talpa de Allende. Here we can see a call, and we found, working with the specialists, that is a new species also. So we established 3 plots in 3 different sites. A total of 50 adult individuals were recorded, measured, the height, the diameter breast height, and we count 20 seedlings. We also collect acorns in June, which is considered the peak of acorn production, and they had a high germination rate, about 80%. Here we can see the maps of the future climate, current and future scenarios. In the letter A, we can see in red all the distribution in the present, and in the color blue, we can see all the polygons that we created to model and delimitate the distribution. We can see through the time the loss of the species in the yellow color, and then in the worst scenario, in the light blue, we can see that the species lost all the distribution according to these models. So I can show you this picture, this graph, because I think it's better to understand, a little bit easier and faster, so we can see how the distribution of the species is reduced. The risk method analysis of this species determined that Quercus cualensis is in danger of extinction due to the reduced habitat and recent anthropogenic pressures, such as the reactivation of an old gold mine, and the illegal extraction of pine wood in the forest. Quercus cualensis has a very small distribution, and with the climate change scenarios, the species reduce their environmental suitability by 100%. So with all the score, the species is endangered. This is Quercus mexiae, is a local endemic of Jalisco, recently described. Also is found on the road from El Tuito to the Cuale-Zimapan mines, grows frequently and in pine yoke forest, cloth mountain forest, and can be found at lower elevations in the transition zone with the subdeciduous tropical forest in the Cabo Corrientes municipality. Some recorded companion oak species are Quercus aristata, elliptica, laeta, centenaria, cucolobifolia, glaucensis, magnolifolia, and cytophila. In this case, we established 6 plots distributed in the distribution area, and we count 113 adult individuals. We collected acorns, but didn't have a grow germination rate. So we found that due to the small distribution, but larger than Quercus cualensis, and here in the graph we can see the species distribution models, they reduce the distribution, but not so extreme like Quercus cualensis, and the score is subject to special protection. Quercus nixoniana habits in pine oak and mountain cloud forest, and here we have one of the most important populations in Talpa de Allende because it's recorded near to a relictual population of Acer vinsayeri. This species lives in cloud forest and have been reported in Guerrero, Jalisco, and Oaxaca, and is considered endemic to all the biogeographic region of Sierra Madre del Sur. We can find some other oaks like elliptica, mexiae, uxoris, acutifolia, and candicans. But we can, unfortunately, the illegal logging of the Talpa de Allende site from 2017 to 2019 affect many individuals, where only those who survived are in ravines and hard to reach places, and subsequently the fires that occurred during the last years in the area also affected the species, also destroyed all this population. Last, well, according to the distribution models, also we can see that the distribution is reduced and we assigned a score as threatened. This species is particularly vulnerable since the cloud forest is one of the most threatened ecosystems in Mexico, and all the recent anthropogenic pressures like extractions and fire forest, it's very dangerous for this species. Quercus tuitensis is a characteristic species of the transition zone between the oak forest and the tropical subdeciduous forest and tolerates dry conditions, being a completely deciduous oak in winter-spring season, which is not so common in all the Mexican oaks. And it's very characteristic in the tropical subdeciduous forest and has also a very restricted distribution. This species, during the 2 and 3 years that we did fieldwork, we observed that due to the low rainfall these years, many trees aborted the acorns and no acorns were found during this season. According to the distribution models, this is like the most endangered species because even in the optimistic scenarios, the species reduce completely the distribution. So because the distribution area is very small, and the main threats like new roads and dry season and fire in these areas, the populations are in decline. Well, we visit the population the last year with the Vallarta Botanical Garden Group, and they found a lot of seedlings and they decided to collect because they were in a very open area. And for last, I present Quercus centenaria. Quercus centenaria is a new described oak. Is an endemic oak of Jalisco. Is endemic for the western part, and the population visited in Talpa de Allende only can found in glens. Some of the oaks recorded with this species is Quercus cualensis, mexiae, laeta, elliptica, and candicans, and it's a very beautiful and different tree. Here we are processing and in the identification with my colleagues. This is the Dr. Cesar Andres Torres Miranda, who is a specialist in white oaks. So the reopening to the mine, to the gold mine, in El Cuale required the construction of new roads, and these roads cross the species area distribution. So we found new specimens of Quercus centenaria, but this road, we think that are like drying the trees, because there are like only in glens, and this road just got the pass of the water. And for last, in the graph, we can see the distribution model, like in the worst scenario, it's also disappearing. So the score is threatened. So this is a resume that what we found. According to the Mexican law, the NOM 059, Quercus cualensis and tuitensis is in the endangered category, nixoniana and centenaria in threatened category, and mexiae in subject to special protections. According to the IUCN for the red list of oaks, we consider that cualensis is endangered, tuitensis vulnerable, and nixoniana endangered. But also, we now have the data to establish a category for the IUCN. And last, the educational activities. Every time to go to the localities to do field work, we go to the local schools because it's a very small town. This is all the elementary kids in the elementary school, and we establish programs to teach them about the importance of oaks, pines, and all the temperate species. We designed plays. One of my students make a piñata of an acorn. The kids were very happy. This is one part of the evidence that we show. We work with them with draws about the importance of oaks, the landscape that they can recognize, how can they recognize some species, and also we created social media to share the importance of the work that we are doing in this area, but also about the importance of the oaks in the region. This is the other school. There are very few kids. So as conclusions, the threats of land use change and climate change affect each species to different degrees. However, the threat to the temperate forest in the state of Jalisco is critical and could disappear if no actions is taken. Oak species with more restricted distribution are more sensitive to climate change and in situ impacts. Is the case of the tropical oak species in the pessimistic scenarios where Quercus caulensis, tuitensis, and centenaria will disappear. Mexiae is almost lost, and the only one that survives in this scenario is Quercus nixoniana because has a broader distribution. So for us, the most important is to get local communities to recognize the oak species as part of their cultural and environmental legacy to promote the long-term protection. So recently, we start to work with the Vallarta Botanical Garden, and we start a new project. In this project, we focus to the community through student and conservation actions, and we are creating a nursery about the endemic species with the community in the schools, and we hope this is the beginning of the real protection actions to protect the oaks. So here is my team. The Dr. Cesar Andres Torres Miranda, Gabriel Lopez, and Guillermo Huerta, and my student, Jennifer Ramos. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Maribel. Wonderful talk. Any questions or comments for Maribel? Feel free to unmute. Yeah, Roger?
I have, yeah, I'd like to say that was a fantastic, really interesting presentation of 5 species that I'd never heard of or hardly ever heard of. So really interesting to learn about those. Great work, and especially the, ending on the note of the next generation, teaching kids about it, and how I think that's our only hope to counter the otherwise pessimistic scenario that we're envisioning with the opening of the mines and climate change. I have one question. I was interested to see that IUCN and NOM, the Mexican laws, seem to have different categories or different considerations. Are there specific differences you can highlight as to how they evaluate the threat to species, and any comments on which you think is more effective?
Well, for Mexico, the only effective is the NOM because it's the legal frame. So the IUCN don't work here. It's just like a consult, but that's not legal power to do nothing. So this is the first thing. So if we want to really protect, we need to take actions on the legal frame. And for me, the big differences is that the Mexican, the extinction to assign this score is very sensitive to the distribution because you put the score depending to the total of the area of the country. So this is very sensitive because it's a huge country and we have a lot of ecosystems. So it is very sensitive to this. And we must specify a lot of like if the local community uses this species for something, they give a extra point. But if the community don't uses this species, they are not in threat. So for me, these are like the main important differences, like the uses for the community and the distribution according to the whole country. But it's not so different in the whole scheme. But I hope right now, this year, we are in a new like reform or this legal framework, and we are trying to put this new species into this legal frame, but we need like all the evidence to protect the oaks.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, Kate.
Hi, Maribel. Good to see you again. Thank you for
Hi.
your presentation. It was very interesting. It sounds like a lot of these species should be reassessed on the red list and maybe have their status updated, from what I understand. Like if they're data deficient, like with centenaria, it sounds like there's enough information to make them threatened. And perhaps tuitensis should be at least the same threat as cualensis, endangered. Sometimes with the red list, it opens up more funding opportunities. Sometimes funding is only available for species if they're critically endangered or endangered, and data deficient are ignored, or vulnerable are less likely to be funded. So I'd be happy to, maybe we can work together and we can update the assessments to make them more accurate and include all the great work that you all have been doing.
Thank you. Yes, I hope we can update the information. And for me, this is a very starting point because, yeah, no one knows nothing about centenaria or mexiae. Only the people, very few people like me to go to these far places knew the species, and even the pictures are very scarce because it's kind of far and difficult sometimes to get to that localities. But now we have the information and we should do the work together. Thank you.
Great questions. Thank you. Other questions, comments?
I'd just like to say that I put in the chat a link to the page on the IOS website, which includes Maribel's report, and there's a link to the actual final report, which has all the information Maribel's given now and more. So I recommend that for further reading.
Great. Thanks, Roger. And Maribel, I was wondering if you could share, if possible, if you don't mind, sharing a link to those social media accounts you mentioned. It'd be great to follow along the work that you all are doing.
Yes, thank you. I can share in the chat
Okay,
in a few moments. Thank you very
great.
much.
Thank you. And I know you mentioned, Maribel, the nursery, getting that nursery established with the community, which is really exciting. Can you share anything more on just, yeah, next steps and future work that you'll be doing, maybe with the nursery or anything else with these
We just
species?
started this part. Recently, we went with Cristobal, who is the person in the Vallarta Botanical Garden, and we start to go to the community. We talk to the teachers. Well, this locality is it's an ejido, which means they have to take the I don't know the word. Well, they act like a community, so all of them have to be agreed to do that thing. So in this case, they reunite 1 month ago to decide where is the best place to put the nursery, and they decided the school because it's a beautiful and large area, also near to the river. And the option right now is that the kids start to grow and work with us in the nursery for oak species right now. It's like we are going to start, and the next week we are going with Cristobal to El Cuale, which is the community, and maybe we go to the other school in the community of El Tuito, but we are working right now.
Yeah, that's great. Very exciting. Well, look forward to following along on social media and anything else you share out. So thank you. Any other final questions or comments for Maribel? All right. Well, thank you so much again, Maribel. Wonderful presentation and amazing work by you and everyone involved. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'll pass it back to you, Roderick, then introduce
And
our next.
Yeah, well, that was a great start. Now over to Sven, who will give us a brief overview of Bokrijk Arboretum. And I say brief because in the time available, I'm sure he'll be struggle to cover what that collection holds. So over to you, Sven. Thank you.
Thank you, Roderick. I'll try to share my screen.
Okay. Yep, we see it now.
Okay. So good morning or good afternoon from wherever you are watching this presentation. I'm Sven Bronckaers from Arboretum Bokrijk, and I'll give you a brief overview of what we do at the Arboretum, and I'll give you some behind the screens views from our nursery on site. Is this? Oh, okay. So Bokrijk is a very big estate. In total, it's more than 550 hectares, and it's located in Limburg, a province in Belgium. We are most famous for our open air museum, which is about 60 hectares. The Arboretum is 18 hectares. There's a color and sand garden. There's a big castle park. The castle park, the initial plantings from the castle park date back to the late 19th century. So we have some big trees in the castle park, about 130 years old. There's a nursery on site providing for the Arboretum and the botanic collection, also the castle park, but also the open air museum, where we grow historical food crops, etc. And the remaining grounds are forests, ponds, swamps, nature reserve. There's a big playground. Yeah. To give an idea, this is what the open air museum looks like. It's also a very touristic center. We have a main attraction called Cycling Through Water, where they made a concrete construction in between two ponds, and you can bicycle through the water at eye level. But we'll focus on the Arboretum today. So the Arboretum was founded in the 60s. Initially, it was 12 hectares, and the planting was very systematically. So all the oaks together, all the lime trees together. Easy to study the plants, but not very pleasant for the eye, not very aesthetical looking. So luckily, that vision changed in the 80s. Then they made a shift to a more mixed planting. Also in the beginning, there was only trees, a few shrubs and grass as undergrowth, and we had some large beds with annual bedding plants. We don't have those anymore these days. In the 80s, there was also an expansion of the garden. We had extra 6 hectares under a pine tree forest, very sheltered, so ideal to plant some more tender magnolias, oaks, most often evergreen species, but also many of our hollies found a place there. And in 2012, there was also a shift to plant more ground covers, perennials, ferns, etc. Here's a map showing the Arboretum. We still use the names of the locations where the main collections were in the past. So all the rhododendrons were planted together, all the oaks, and those are the locations that we use to find the location of the plant in the database. I'll show you some general views of the garden to give an impression of what it looks like. So we have many cyclamen. Here's a Parthenopsis growing in Quercus robur and Quercus rubra. This is more like a swampy area, Taxodium in the middle, Cornus controversa variegata. There are also many flowers, Edichiums, Eucas. There's a big fuchsia collection. Photo from the elevation working machine. Again, a swampy area with some stepping stones through the water. These are photos from yesterday. Very nice Schizophragma or now Hydrangia, Hydrangeoides in flower, and the giant lilies, Cardiocrinum. Magnolias, one of our main collections, and ferns. So the main collections, like I said, holly, we have a lot of them. We're probably the largest holly collection in Europe, about 800 different taxa, more than 1,800 accessions. The fern collection is growing a lot. Rhododendron collection too, but we have many cultivars, so the rhododendron collection is not very qualitatively botanical wise. Magnolia is a very big collection, about 450 different taxa. Bamboo or woody grasses, 260 taxa. And of course the oaks, about 1,100 trees of 240 different taxa. These collections can be viewed online, can be accessed online on the website botanicalcollections.be, and you can find all the collections of botanic gardens in Belgium. So also from our colleagues from Westpolaar, from Meeze, all the other botanic gardens and arboreta are accessible on this website. Very helpful. But now we'll have a look at the oak collection, of course. So I'll do an overview. It's only a small selection of what we have. I think I'll show about 30 different species, more or less in alphabetical order. So we start with a banger. This is our one of our most special and most impressive oaks, Quercus arcansana. It's the Belgian champion tree and maybe even the champion tree in cultivation. Who knows? Girth is about 200 centimeters and it's 20 meters tall. It's one of the many oaks that are endangered in their native habitat, and we got this one from the Bokrijk Arboretum in 1980 from their index seminum. It was wild collected material from Louisiana. And if we look here, we see some people who might look familiar. This was a photo taken during the Oak Open Days about a month ago, and our detail of the trunk of the Arkansana. Next, we have a Quercus buxenraak mystery. I think about 10 years ago, there was an article for the iOS and also for the Belgian dendrologists about new Bokrijk oak cultivars. And this was one of them. The seeds were collected in the Parel Arboretum in South Africa. And it's supposed to be a hybrid of Invaginata, Quercus invaginata, with Quercus ilex. And the most remarkable thing about this plant is that it is showing an impressive hardiness. Even in very cold winters with -20 centigrades frost, this one had no leaf damage, no frost cracks, nothing. While most of all the other evergreen oaks completely lost their leaves, and we also lost many plants, or some died back to the ground and had to resprout from the ground. This one had no damage at all. And it's also very fast growing. So might be a good tree to be grown more. But unfortunately, it never set any good crop yet, any acorns. So it seems to be sterile. Quercus acerifolia, another endangered one. And Quercus baloot from Afghanistan, Pakistan, recently planted. Quercus caliprinos. The name is a bit doubtful. Some consider it now a synonym of Coxifera. But these were collected on some of the island of Greece from very big trees. And in some insides, the plants in the east of the Mediterranean basin are caliprinos, and they become much bigger than the plants in the west of the Mediterranean region, which stay much smaller, more shrubby-like growth, which are considered Coxifera. And I follow that theory by now. Quercus chapmani, a dwarf oak from US, I think Alabama, Florida, very slow growing. Quercus chrysolepis, Californian oak, and another Mediterranean one, Pseudocoxifera subspecies Rivas martinezi from Spain and Portugal. Here we have another of our Bokrijk selections, Granata Mirterlieben, named after one of our gardeners. Again from the Parel Arboretum in South Africa. And probably Ceres hybrid with Suber. But we're not, it's not completely sure. Quercus engleriana, maybe one of my favorites. Species from China and India. Very long leaves, evergreen. Quercus franchettii. The new growth can be very pink colored. I was just too late to make the photo here, but the underside of the leaf is always nice, very glaucous, very gray. And another Bokrijk cultivar. This one was collected from seeds from Quercus robur cristata at Trompenburg Arboretum in the Netherlands. And it was probably pollinated by Quercus frenetto, which was growing nearby. It's a very good tree, fast growing. The leaves are sturdy. It produces a lot of seeds and it comes through from seed. The seedlings look identical to the mother plant. Quercus glauca, species with a very wide range, almost whole Southeast Asia. Ilicifolia, species from US, East Coast, I think. Quercus kelloggii, very nice young juvenile growth, like a very bright pink flush, going good together with the Magnolia liliflora flowers behind. Species from California, Mexico. Quercus laurifolia, already quite a big tree. We only measured it recently, but it will probably be a Belgian champion. A species from the US again. This one, Quercus leucotrichophora. We got it as well, collected material from India, but it also has quite a big range from Bangladesh to India to Pakistan. It's on the edge, hardiness-wise with us. It had some frost damage already in a colder winter when it got like -16 centigrade. But now it's doing fine. The last winters were quite mild and there was no leaf damage. So maybe if they can grow a little bit and they get taller, they might be good to survive next colder winters. Quercus marilandica, a very showy plant. And Neopalmeri, a hybrid of Nigra and Schumardii, very fast growing, the Neopalmeri. Quercus mischauxi, same origin as the Arkansana, also from the Morton Arboretum, sown in 1980. The champion tree in Belgium again. And this is a very small one, Quercus pumila, species from the Southeast USA. Very old plant, I think also sown in the 80s, and it's about 1 meter tall and 2 meters wide. One from the Pontic Alps in Turkey, Quercus pontica, very nice compact shrub. Quercus sessilifolia, from China, Japan, Taiwan. Not to be confused with Quercus sessiliflora, the sessile oak, Quercus petrea. This one is evergreen. Very nice species, can grow into quite a big tree. I've seen them in the wild in Japan. And Quercus monimotricha, a Chinese species, which stays very small. Quercus stenophyloides, species from Taiwan. And a very good example of a fastigiate Quercus robur we have. Quercus sinuata, Southeast US species. And true Quercus rhizophila from Mexico. We also grow the Maya, which might be a rhizophila hybrid with some influence of something else. I'll get to that one later. Cualensis from Taiwan, growing very nice now. In the beginning, very slow, had some frost damage, but now it's growing quite fast, about 1 meter a year. Turbinella, not such a big tree, but I think for Belgium or Europe, it's quite a big one. Again, Southwest USA species and maybe Mexico too. Quercus virginiana, Southeast USA. These plants were collected in the most northern growing location in Virginia. Quercus sartori from Mexico, and a very rare one, Quercus tomentella, the island oak from the Channel Islands near California. Like we saw in the previous presentation, very endangered. And the last oak, Quercus xera, a very nice one. Again, a Rhizophila hybrid, but here falcata is the mother parent. growing very fast. It's a nice evergreen tree. This is one that should be grown much more. Very nice species. I wanted to also show a few related things. So very closely related to the oaks. We have not only Carpus densiflorus, but also I'm a fan of Castanopsis species. Lithocarpus, of course, Plevicodatus from China and Taiwan. This was wild material from Taiwan Forestry Institute. Lithocarpus henryi, quite big. Producing flowers for many years, but very rarely we have acorns on it, unfortunately. And Lithocarpus herlandii, a very fast growing Lithocarpus with big leaves. Leaves are about half bigger than henryi. So that was a brief overview of our oaks. Now I'll show some info about the nursery. So the nursery is providing the arboretum and the botanic collections. We have a glass house, 2 polytunnels, all kept frost-free. There's a small warm compartment, which we keep at about 15, 16 degrees in winter. We have a room where we do the fern sowing, raised beds, shade house, and this is all done by one nurseryman and some help from the rest of the gardening team on rainy days. We do this in particular to grow species that are not available in the regular trade and to be able to grow things from seeds that we got from exchange, but also from cuttings, spores or divisions. And quite often we have the known provenance and collection info, which is very important, which you cannot get if you just buy plants in common trade. Also to lower the costs, especially when we plant large numbers of ferns, perennials. Also to be able to try different propagation methods like air layering, which I will explain, and to propagate some of our own Bokrijk selections. Some photos from the greenhouse. As you see, it's a mix of many things, mainly ferns, but also a lot of woody plants. This is the fern house, all grown from spores or from leaf bulbils. Some irisemas. You can imagine if you want to buy these at maybe 20 euros a bulb. That's why we propagate them ourselves. Ferns, the propagator where we do the cuttings in winter, also where we do the air layers when they come from the tree in summer or end of summer, and the fern sowing. But that's something different. That's not for this talk. Labeling is important. It took a very long time, but since last year we finally got a labeling machine for the nursery, so I'm very happy with this one. And this is a part of the oak collection, which is still in pot. Some of them are in pot, some of them are growing in the nursing beds. Quite often, especially when the plants get bigger, we use air pots to prevent the circulation of roots and to have a nicer fine roots, hair roots. For the oaks, it's mainly sowing that we do, usually after cold stratification. And something new that we are doing since the last 3-4 years is air layering. Stratification looks like this. They go into a tiny Ziploc bag, well labeled. They go in the refrigerator for 3 months, and then we sow them in the greenhouse. About the air layering, you can do it virtually with any woody shrub. Also species that are very difficult or impossible to propagate from cuttings or grafting. The large benefit is that the plant is growing on its own roots, which is, especially with oaks, might be a thing in the future to have delayed incompatibility or rootstock failure. And you got quite a large plant immediately. On the other hand, it's very labor intensive, making the air layer, but especially the following up. It's quite labor intensive, and it's difficult if you want to have large quantities. But for us as a collection, if we have like 2 or 3 plants from one species, it's more than enough, so that's doable. Air layering. I didn't have photos of the process itself with oaks, but it's the same. Here we see it on the camellia. We do it early in spring, usually in March. We remove the bark from about 5 centimeters. Also, you have to scratch the cambium with a knife, so the connection is completely gone. You make a clear wound like this. Sometimes you treat it with rooting hormone like Clonex gel or Risipon. I also heard honey would work. We're trying that this year. We're doing a test with honey. Here we have the moss that we use. You can use either sphagnum moss or normal moss growing in the garden. This was moss that we found on the foil in the nursery. So any moss will do. Then you can use one of these preformed balls, or you can just wrap it in plastic and foil. Aftercare, keep the moisture level okay. So if it's too wet, if it's raining a lot, and the rain goes through the stem into the hole, so it will get very wet, then you have to squeeze it now and then. If it's a very dry period, which we have now, then you have to moisten it with a syringe. You can just put a needle in the plastic and do some water in there. That's something we do now every 2 or 3 weeks. When the air layer is in full sun, you can wrap it with like silver foil or any reflective foil or tape. And from June to July, you can see the first roots if everything is going well. We cut the plastic open, we check. If there's no roots, we tape it back. And if there's a nice root ball, you can cut off the marcotte under the air layer and take it inside. If there's no roots, you can damage the callus, which is forming, treat it with rooting hormone, and you have to take them inside before winter anyway, because if they will overwinter in the garden, they will die. This is what a successful air layer looks like. This is what it looks like on an oak. So when you take the air layer inside, prune it back, plant it in a pot, keep it under high humidity in the greenhouse, and keep it definitely frost-free for the first winter. This was a Quercus nigra. The colleague of the nursery is very into bonsai, and this was one of his own projects. We had quite a big Quercus nigra with a limb that had to be removed, and he tried to save it with an air layer to turn it into a bonsai, and it worked very well. This was the first batch of oaks grown from air layers. We see nigra here, but also Maya, Philaroides, Robur hungaria, and a few others. Look at the root forming. So this is the year after the air layer was done. So this was early spring in the second year, before they were growing. And this is how they look now in the nursing bed. We let them grow a little bit until they are maybe like 1.5 or 2 meters, and then we will plant them in the arboretum. These were all grown from air layers. That's it. We're always looking for new oaks to expand the collection. So here is something like I would call a wish list, maybe for the future. If there are any questions, please ask them, or you can always get in contact with me. There's my email address, or yeah.
Wonderful.
I hope you enjoyed.
Yes, very wonderful presentation as well. Thank you so much, Sven. Questions for Sven? Feel free to unmute. I had a question about the air layering, Sven. I guess just if you had to summarize how much success you've had with that, and also how long would you say from like start to finish does that take you for air layering?
Well, in general, if you do the air layer, if it fails, you will see it quite right away. You will see it after a few weeks or in spring when it starts growing. But after all, about 70-75% of all the air layers we do will work.
Great.
This year we are doing quite a big project in a private garden with a big oak collection. We've done about 80 air layers there on 20-25 different species. And on one species, they all failed quite immediately, and all the others look still okay. So, and we do it in spring, and you have to take the air layer in the same year. If everything is going well, you will have roots by now or in August, September. And then you have to take it in and treat it like a big cutting in the polytunnel under high humidity. But you have to take it in. If it stays on the tree in winter, it will die anyway. So from doing the air layer to having a full rooted plant, I would say 1 year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, well, it sounds like good success with it. Yeah, Roderick.
Yeah, thanks for a great presentation, Sven. It was really interesting to see the propagation section, because that is something we sadly didn't have time to see while we were there. Very interesting indeed. A couple of just specific questions about the oaks that I saw there in your presentation. The Quercus balut, that must be from sourced from a garden source, right? And it seems to be coming true, right? That's interesting to see. And your Quercus Heinaldiana Bokrijk selection, I'm puzzled by that because it seems to me quite similar to just, I think it's the Quercus roba cristata parent. I don't see the Quercus frainetto influence. And reading up on it, it just seems that they assumed it was pollinated by Quercus frainetto because they were both flowering at the same time or something like that. But then you say that the seedlings are coming true, which again suggests that it's not a hybrid. Do you think it might just be a Quercus roba cultivar rather than a hybrid?
Well, good question. I know the Quercus balut is coming from our good friend Jeroen, and I thought he had the seeds from some wild origin, but I have to check the database for that.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know so. And the Heinaldiana, I have to check what Jeff wrote about it when the description was done in the iOS book.
Yes, I shared a link to that article if people are interested to read more about those cultivars. Really interesting cultivars and not very well known, actually.
I thought there was the main difference was how thick the leaves were feeling. That it was much sturdier, much stiffer leaf compared to normal Robur cristata. But I have to read the complete article. I don't see it here directly. What might be the reason why they suggested it was the Frainetto hybrid.
Okay, thank you. Interesting. Amy, I see we have a question in the chat.
Yes. So there's a question about wondering about the non-indigenous Quercus from the Mediterranean region, for example. How do they behave and adapt in the new environment?
Well, they all do quite well, actually. The native Quercus robur is not doing well the last couple of years. We had many losses also of big trees, sometimes without a clear reason. So we're now really testing many new oaks from the Mediterranean region, but also from Mexico, from California, Texas, to see how they grow and how they can handle the extreme climate change we are witnessing. And it's both dry and hot conditions, but also very wet conditions. Like last year, for example, we had a very wet year, extremely wet. But the 5 years before that were extremely hot and dry. And now we're experiencing a new dry period with very high temperatures for being this early in summer. So I think we need to test as many as possible plants, not only oaks, but plants in general, and see how they behave and see which plant can cope with this extreme changes in climate and which don't. Not only for arboreta, but also maybe for use in public gardens or public spaces in the future. These tests are very interesting. So, but the Mediterranean oaks are doing very well.
Great, thank you. Good question. Yes. And then Maribel had a good comment about excellent presentation. It's a lot of new oaks, and it's common to see or recognize hybrids between Asian and European oaks. Any other questions or comments for Sven? Great. Well, thank you so much again, Sven. Really wonderful talk. Thank you so much for sharing this work with us. There looked like there was just from our general announcements we shared earlier, Roderick, about the pre and post conference tours and just looking for more information for people to book flights. So I don't know if you want to comment on that at all, Roderick, or...
Yeah, I saw that question, Michael. The dates are actually on the website, but by all means, write to me or to the website, to the email provided on the website, and we'll can answer any specific questions you have about those dates. But yes, they are fixed, so you'll be able to book your flights now.
Great. Thanks, Roderick. And then a question just came in from Jason Lee, working at the Korea National Baekdudaegan Arboretum. And he said, thank you for the talk and the explanation about air layering. And he's asking, isn't cutting or grafting commonly used for propagating Quercus species? Sven, Roderick?
Well,
yeah.
it's commonly used, especially grafting. But I'm not a fan of grafting, especially regarding oaks, because we had quite some big losses of old trees because of rootstock failure or delayed incompatibility. So that's really a thing with oaks. I would only graft them when it's a cultivar of a species. So if you have a robur fastigiata which you want to graft, you can easily graft it on a robur. But if you go to other species or definitely to other sections, I would never do it with grafting. That's why we're trying to do it with air layering. Cuttings would also be possible, but we don't have much experience with cuttings. It's not so easy. I think the timing is very important, and you need to have a juvenile plant to take the cuttings from. Maybe Roderick has more experience with cuttings. I don't know.
Not personally, but I mean, it's interesting to see when I first joined the IOS about, I don't know, 15 years ago, cuttings were like, people were saying, you can't grow oaks from cuttings, forget it. But it's becoming more and more common. You're seeing it quite a lot now, especially with evergreen oaks and tropical oaks. So I think it's being done and with more success as years go by. But what I thought was really interesting, Sven, to see in your air layering is that, of course, you get trees with very thick stems. These new, whereas with cuttings they would be small and delicate. So it's really interesting to see what the type of new propagules or new trees you're getting with those air layers. Quite different to cuttings.
Yeah, we aim to do air layers on plants that needs to be at least a finger thick, the stem. So about 1.5 centimeters thickness at least.
At least, but some of them were quite a bit thicker than that, right?
Yeah, you can easily go to 50 or 20 centimeters.
Wow.
It's used a lot in bonsai. So Patrick, the nurseryman, he is very into bonsai, and that's how he brought the air layering technique into our propagation routine.
Interesting.
Great. Well, thank you for those answers and thanks for that question. Does anyone else on the call want to comment on that question at all with cuttings or grafting or air layering? Does anyone else have experience they want to share? Right. Quiet crowd. That's okay. Well, thanks again for the questions and thanks again for our presenters, Maribel and Sven. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your amazing work with us. So we really appreciate it. Roderick, was there anything else you wanted to go over for discussion or?
No, if anyone has any other general questions about OS matters or the conference, speak up now. But I just want to say I'm delighted to see that we've really put the international into the name of the International Oak Society today. I'm looking through participants, and I believe we have not, obviously we've got Belgium and Mexico represented in our presenters, but I think we have participants from every continent here. I think we've got someone from Australia, Africa, as well, aside from North America and Europe, obviously, Asia. I think we've got people from Korea, South America. So fantastic. Really good to see you all here. Any other questions before we close?
Roderick and the group,
Hey,
I just would like, I'd like to comment on the grafting part. I have essentially probably 15, 20 years grafting red oaks in particular that have a reputation for being grafting compatible. And my experience, especially with the golden red oak or say the columnar pin oak, is that a sterile technique is very important in just to verify that you clean a knife with we use xylitol or what is it, a peroxide material, or you can use alcohol and then flame the knife, clean the graft union and the sign wood so that when you make each cut, you have as close to sterile conditions as possible, because you can imagine the sugars and the various life-giving components of a graft union and that cambium material. None of that exists in none of that exists in I should say, when you cut the graft, cut the sign wood and the rootstock, it's essentially like using a dirty needle, and who would do that? We get away with it simply because so many plants are easy to graft, but everything from tomatoes, annual plants to very hard woody plants, there's a lot we get away with, and then we assume that the failures may be due to genetic factors when in fact, I think in a lot of cases it's technique. So I would encourage people who want to graft to take that extra step with very hard woody material like oaks. And for example, you could do a very easy trial and start out with, if you have extra wood and rootstock, do some as a control without sterile technique, and some with extra precautions. I think you'll find a good difference there, in my experience.
Thank you, Mark. That's really interesting. I don't think I've heard that explanation before for grafting incompatibility, but it's really worth good advice from someone who knows about grafting. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mark. Well, yeah, any final words, Roderick, or any final comments or questions from anyone?
I think we're good. It's been a great webinar. Thanks to the presenters. Thanks to all who joined. Thanks for your questions and comments. And look forward to seeing you at the next webinar, which will be in August, we hope. And that'll be shortly before the conference, where I hope to see many of you. Thanks,
Great.
Amy.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Have a good rest of your day, afternoon, and evening. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Get out of it.